Not much. What's going on with you?
You know, same old thing. Hold on.
Okay.
Dark in my office.
What you doing?
Hey, how are you?
Was it just Kim and Chuck and Derlin and me and Suzanne?
Yep.
Nice. We're gonna get so much done tonight. It's gonna be awesome.
Woohoo. Good. Let's get some stuff done.
All right. Do you want to get started or are we waiting for anybody else? Stephanie said she would be participating, I believe, but I don't know if she's going to call in or if I assume she's going to Zoom in. So I don't know. Do you guys want to get started or wait a little bit?
Let's start.
All right. Well, my first question had to do with the joint workshop, and we had talked about this a while back, and I reached out to some folks and they said they were going to include me on the list, and I don't know if it ever happened or not. But was there a joint workshop with economic development folks, and anybody know about that?
Yes, there was. It took place up at MD 365. I don't think it was last week. I think it might have been 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
What were the outcomes of that meeting?
Basically, it was getting to know, there were some business folks and there was some summer residents and Island Housing Trust was there in a group. So I think the consensus was that they would have another meeting. That one was more or less sort of get to know who you are, what the organizations do and stuff like that. So I think there'll be another invite coming sometime here.
Okay. And I'm just because I'm kind of acting as your planner, you know, is it worth me trying to insert myself in that process?
Yeah, I think you might have something to offer.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, definitely.
And actually, they were supposed to include me, and I don't know. I didn't see it on the calendar, and I didn't know how it was getting hosted or who was doing what. So I guess I never knew it was happening. So anyway.
Yeah, no, I think it would be good. It was a fairly good cross section. I'd like to have seen a few more organizations, but there was a good cross section of people there. So I thought.
Okay. Great. All right. Well, we won't need to dwell on it, but I'll follow up with somebody. I don't know whoever's putting it together. I guess it must be MD 365.
Yeah, I'll see that you make sure that when I get an invite, I'll make sure I'll forward it to you if for some reason you're not copied on the list. So
Okay.
yeah.
Cool. Thanks. All right. So the other thing on the agenda is, oh, by the way, Suzanne Paul is here. She's working with me. Suzanne's the other planner, and I think some of you might already have met her, but I'm not positive about that. So that's the Suzanne on the other end.
Hey, everybody.
Morning, Suzanne.
And Callie Martinez might jump on later, but I'm not sure. She's also working with me. So there could be more Musson Group people than committee members tonight. But anyways, Suzanne and Callie have been working really hard on the research on the short-term rental stuff. And, you know, I think there's a lot to do. Plus, they'll be jumping in on comp plan and village planning issues. So anyway, just in case anybody's wondering. All right, so with the subdivision revision, I'm not sure if we really need to dig into this tonight since there's not a lot of people here, but where we've been focusing time on a couple of different areas. One is taking the model that we went through about a year ago, and I'm doing a pretty good comparison between what we have in the current standards and if we have to make some tweaks, but really trying to figure out the bigger part of it is trying to figure out how the new law fits into the subdivision rules, the new housing affordability law, and B, where the how we can kind of unwind the workforce housing provisions and the clustering provisions and the open space provisions in the ordinance to be more clearly separated. So that you're dealing with, you know, workforce housing and open space and clustering are all kind of separate goals that can be separate tools that can be used, as opposed to having them be well, currently it's not that clear how they're tied together, or even if they are tied together. We just need to kind of separate that out. And as Kim knows, the calculating workforce housing density bonuses isn't necessarily the easiest thing in the world. So trying to figure out a way to make that a little more straightforward. So we've got a lot of definitions in a couple models that we're looking at, and probably the best thing to do, rather than just throw a bunch of stuff at you, is for me to work it up in an ordinance language structure and then ship it off. But if you'd rather do it a different way, we have a lot of background data.
Makes sense to me at least.
The
What's
one
that?
that you provided to us in 2019,
Yep,
that's the model through the state, correct?
it's based on the state model, yes.
Yeah, but it didn't incorporate the statute about the year-round housing. That's
Not the
Okay.
not the new one. It hasn't. Yep.
right.
And
So
you may be able to deal with that in different ways without just strictly being tied to the subdivision rules. Like we're already kind of dealing with it in the land use ordinance, because we allow more density pretty much everywhere in the term, in the what we're not calling it like accessory dwelling units. We're calling them, what are we calling them? Accessories. We're allowing that accessory dwelling unit. So
yeah, but this is it's my understanding, this is being worked on what Governor Mills signed.
yeah,
I hear a lot of towns, we got representation for the, MBOIA, which is the Maine Building Officials and Inspectors Association. We got a lot of towns that this is kind of overkill on what she did.
yep,
And we're trying to retrofit it to their ordinances and our ordinances, and we have until July of 2023 to get something incorporated, whether it's this or whether it's what's coming down the pike as far as an amendment. So just be aware of that, Noel.
okay,
To try, if we're gonna retrofit it into our subdivision ordinance or a LUZO, but I know something is going to them to tweak this and modify it, because it doesn't work for every town and city in the state of Maine.
yeah, yep, yeah. I think that we're digging into it a little bit, and what I may want to do is check in with Andy at some point earlier in the process to make sure that, I don't know if they're doing anything at Eaton Peabody or seeing any other language that we need to kind of consider, but it probably wouldn't hurt to check in with Andy or John, probably
Yeah.
John, probably
Okay.
John via Andy.
Somebody, because I know that's, yeah.
Yep. But I think what we're going to do is probably we're definitely working on the subdivision ordinance. And I know actually I've already read this stuff. Suzanne went to Maine Association of Planners meeting a month or so ago, and they had a presentation on that same thing, Kim,
Okay,
and what different people are thinking about. So we've already started looking at that.
great.
Yep. But I also believe that there's a bunch of stuff that you already have in the land use ordinance that is fairly applicable to whatever you're working on. It's just some things need to be tied in the growth areas to more income, that income tie in,
Yeah. Have you guys, well, I'll wait till you do the short-term stuff.
So, yeah, that's really where we are in the subdivision ordinance. I have a big, like a 3-page thing that we had prepared before Friday, but I think it's probably more, it's not tight enough to like share with everybody. I think what we ought to do is just create the language, and then we'll share it with you. Like, here's how what do you think about this approach to, taking what you already have for workforce housing and then converting it into these goals? Because it sounds like everybody's in favor of the goals. So we need workforce housing provisions in the subdivision ordinance that are tied, so density bonuses tied to affordability. And then we want to have some open space provisions. So where and how do those apply? And then we might want to have some clustering provisions as well. So that's what we're trying to figure out. What's a good way to write that up so it makes sense. The other thing I would talk about is at some point we're going to want to talk about is like how we define workforce housing. And some places it's tied to an income range, and more they're starting to be more, you know, the municipalities kind of care about a bunch of different things. So affordability is one. So the income range, you know, percentage of area median income and all that good stuff. But also like more year round. So, you know, density bonus is tied to requirements for year round housing that aren't necessarily tied to, or maybe even tied to a higher range of income. So actually was just talking to Island Housing Trust about that today. So it's kind of interesting models to think about, and how as a municipality, can you just kind of have the tools that organizations or individuals need to use to help you fulfill the goal, but you're kind of, you have the toolkit that they can dip into, you know, in order to do a good development. So that's the subdivision ordinance. There's also things, Kim, if you're reading through the subdivision ordinance for like technical questions, maybe you and I could go over that, but I'm already starting to work on like, let's make sure that we don't just have, you know, the requirement for granite monuments in the corners, and, you know, we allow for pins and blah, 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 all that good stuff.
Okay.
So I started that too, but you and I may want to just sit down. Like if you've had a chance to go through it, we can hammer out those details, I think. But what I would say is, yeah, it's time to update your subdivision ordinance.
Yeah, clearly, yes.
All right. Well, let's move on to short-term rentals. So Derlin, you could report to Martha that we are definitely making progress on short-term rentals. It's a big topic. And I think the last time we talked to her and the Board of Selectmen, the idea was maybe having some options for a survey. So one of the things I sent around via email the other day was, here's some sample survey questions, and then sort of the format that we're looking at is really the kind of, you know, do you strongly disagree or do you agree kind of questions that we can ask. So we have some kind of basic background questions, and then we have some, you know, agree to disagree questions. And then at the end, you know, I just added some kind of other questions, like how do you measure, you know, people's feelings about, you know, the neighborhoods and how short-term rentals affect that, which we may or may not want to do for this particular survey. But I think one of the tools we talked about was a survey. So that was these questions. So I was hoping to get a little feedback on the survey questions tonight. I don't know if anybody actually read them.
I actually did today.
Yep. So if anybody has feedback.
Have you established or created any type of ordinance yet? Or
We're working on models right now. Yep. Actually,
Okay.
that we had even more, if you believe it or not, since we were talking about it this morning, and then we on the Maine Association of Planners sort of email exchange, like somebody asked a question and there was like a bunch of other ordinance models that popped up today that I thought were really interesting. I was just reading, the town of Cape Elizabeth has a pretty interesting one that it's up on my screen right now, actually. So, yep. What I think the next step would be is just to come up with the ordinance language. But I wanted to also get some feedback tonight on how people feel about the definition of short-term rentals. And we also had that, you know, a couple of different examples, and a lot of them are, you know, have similar elements in terms of the less than 30-day, you know, stay and that kind of stuff. But I didn't know if anybody looked at those either.
what are you finding in your reviews of all ordinances? What is common that you seem to see that is more prominent? Is it a week, couple days?
I don't think that they're necessarily tied to the length of stay. I think that the common denominator of the definition is really less than 30 days. That's the one that I've seen more often. So that's what's tied to it. I think we already have some things in the ordinance that are kind of like that as well. In terms of the definition. So like what qualifies as a short-term rental is less than 30 days. You're there less than 30 days. And then there's other terminology which people use, like there's a nightly rental provision, there's like overnight accommodations, like a hotel room.
Yeah, well, wouldn't that distinguish, in short term versus hotel kind of? I guess it all depends too on where it is and what's provided for services, I would think.
Some of that, yep, for sure. Yep,
I think overnight would be more impactful than less than 30 days. If you got people coming and going in a neighborhood.
overnight, yep.
Yeah, or I don't think that maybe overnight shouldn't be offered. I don't know.
I know what they do in Tremont is it's basically 7 days. That's like the minimum stay.
No less than 7 days.
Yep.
I agree with that too.
But then there's a lot of places that do like, it's an economic. So there's like a 4-night minimum or 3-night minimum, but they're not hotel rooms where you can only, you could only stay for 1 night. So the economics part is you can get more people, especially in the shoulder seasons, you could get more people to stay for a, long weekend as opposed to a full week.
Mm.
There's a lot of people just want to come up for the long weekend.
Right. Yeah. And you can stack them in a little differently. It provides a little more flexibility, I think.
So how does that get regulated? By permit?
Well, I don't think you would be. So if you were trying to keep it simple approach, I would say you'd want to just be as broad as you can and really try to figure out what it is we're trying to regulate. And so for the first time, initially, what we're trying to do is figure out, do we want to tie these properties to people who live on that property year round, or who have some relationship with the area that they own the property, as opposed to, if you're, Vacasa coming in to buy 7 dwelling units in Mount Desert, and they're just that's their sole purpose.
Right.
So there's a bunch of different ways to look at it. I think that's what we're trying to figure out, like that's part of the reason why the survey might be really interesting, like kind of figure out how you do that. But what people's, thoughts are on, the level of regulatory structure. And then the larger question is where sometimes, should you allow vacation? It's not going to be that easy in Mount Desert to say where you should regulate it, but that's like one of the other effects is on neighborhoods. It has a tendency to change the character of a neighborhood a little bit, as not just from an affordability perspective, but now there's no families living in this neighborhood or whatever. What I liked about, Cape Elizabeth is interesting. We just had some Kennebunkport has one today that I haven't had a chance to look at yet, but I'm going to. And one of the things that they struggled with was the same concept as Mount Desert, which is, a large portion, I think they said half of their population is seasonal. So they have a lot of seasonal homes, more than half, I think. So it's very similar to Mount Desert. But yet you also have people who, that's a very historic industry where, like the example of my family has always rented out their house, and we just moved to our camp, in on George's Pond or whatever. So that I think about that as the emotional factor. How do you continue to support that, but be proactively kind of thinking about the effect of this on housing stock and availability and affordability. So those are all the models we're looking at.
And it's going to be tough.
Yep. It's a good one.
Yeah.
It's but also, it's coming. We have to like set the stage for it somehow. I think that's the main objective. If I were to say what should be our main objective, if you were to ask me, I'd say, we don't have a lot of data right now, and the basic thing we could do is just have a registration ordinance.
Is that maybe what we're moving towards for 2023, or?
I think so. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, and then tied to like basic, if you're gonna do this, then you need to make sure you have, smoke detectors in your house kind of thing. And then you start to get into other more restrictive
Yeah,
measures.
like how will that affect, like if somebody wants to start renting their house after an ordinance is, adopted? And you got people now that are going into a house or a building that are unfamiliarized with it. And does that require, like bringing windows up to egress opening requirements and staircases and?
I'm not sure we'd go to that extreme, Kim. I was thinking again, on the keep it simple approach, where like how much more time would that take for somebody in your position to have to go out and like make sure everybody changes to egress windows and blah, blah, blah. Is there like an easier way to, okay, if you have a registration ordinance, basically the first couple of years, we just want to track how many there are, where they are, and if there's a growth pattern. And then make sure, if there are places that are unsafe, that they're being, that there's at least a basic safety measure. That's the tie-in, probably. Not necessarily like, let's go through a whole life safety code review of every structure to make sure they can be rented that way. Seems like that'd be a lot of work for you.
Yeah, and believe me, I'm not asking for that. Not at all.
And also, I really am sensitive to the politics of it. I think it's a really good idea to understand the extent of the issue, and then the way, like we've talked about before, we could send this survey out and we can calculate what response rate we want to get in order to have this thing be statistically valid. But the only other way to really understand it comprehensively is to require people to get a license. So, and I guess, I don't know if it would be, I'm not a weekly rental person in Mount Desert, but I can't imagine you could set a fee that would be so bad that it would be a deterrent for anybody to do it.
Has Bar Harbor done anything?
Bar Harbor has its own, yeah, they're actually, this is sort of how they started off, actually, Chuck, with more kind of registration and kind of life safety. And then I think it was either last year or the year before, they changed the rules a little bit to start to limit where and how you can have weekly rentals. So they're more restrictive than we're going to be. But I do think that's because of what is happening in Bar Harbor, the demand is going to be pushed to other towns on MDI, and you just have to be prepared for the results of that.
So are their rentals mostly done either by the homeowner or done by rental agents?
That's a good question. I think there's a pretty good mixture of both, but I'd have to ask Michelle, the planner.
So I think the rental agents here usually check the houses out for life safety as far as smoke detectors working and stuff. Make sure they have.
Yep. Oh, Katrina was the one that brought up the whole smoke detector thing, because she said, it's not required. And she would ask people to put one in, and then some homeowners would be like, I don't need to put a smoke detector in. And then she would say, well, we can't rent it then. And that's not a requirement. But,
Right.
if you have a little more teeth into a registration ordinance, that would give you that ability to,
And
not have to argue with a homeowner about it.
Now gas too. Carbons and gas.
Yeah, but they're almost the same thing now anyway, right? So.
Only if it really gas appliance. Yeah.
So, what I'm hearing is we want to do something. We want to be prepared. We've gotten a directive from the Board of Selectmen, because there's a legitimate, concern. What we also know is that the price of housing in Mount Desert is like unattainable for most average households. And, so we know that, and some of that is correlation and some of it is independent. And we know that we don't have a huge amount of data on how many properties in Mount Desert are used for vacation rentals, and we need to collect that data in order to understand the current situation.
How many
I think
camps on
that's-
Long Pond do you suppose get rented?
What's that?
How many camps on Long Pond do you suppose get rented?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. Maybe we'll find out.
A lot.
Yeah. And this is not a judgment on my part about the validity of and the value of vacation rentals either. I think it's a data point and an issue that needs to be thought about. And I would also add that to solve that, the housing affordability issue this is only one small piece of that. There's many other factors that are at play when it comes to housing affordability. Namely, real estate values and availability of housing stock and cost of construction. And now interest rates.
Yeah, people are building though. It's not slowing down.
Who though? Who?
A
Who's
lot
building?
of people.
Yeah. I'm sure you're busy.
Just a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. Yep. But I don't know. I mean, it's all part of the issue. I think a lot of this ties in with your comprehensive plan, I will say. They're really interesting discussions. Anyway, any reactions on the questions, on the survey questions?
I thought it was a good start and all. I thought there was some good information available.
Great.
Get them to fill them out.
So did you create that list by the ordinances that you've come across? Or
Yeah,
maybe-
actually, yeah, we've done well, Callie mostly has done a lot of research and Suzanne did a lot of research. So we did a lot of research on the types of questions that we want to ask, like what is it that you're trying to get out of a survey? And then the model of the ordinances start to play into that in a slightly different way, Kim, but yep. And some of the survey thing it's also like a public process question and how we want to engage the community and, in the discussion rather than just like drop an ordinance on everybody. That this is one tool that we can use to help to bring the conversation forward a little bit.
One of the things I've noticed, Noel, and I'm not sure how many other people get them, I'm assuming a lot. Every few months, I get a proposal from a rental company.
Yep.
And I don't know if it's the same one. I just rip it out and throw it away. But I don't know if it's the same one or it's a bunch of different, but I'm assuming, they're fishing in Mount Desert to try to come in. And these are things like, I was looking where they come out of, like Seattle, Washington. I mean, they're not local by any means.
No, I mean, this is they're trying to generate, I get those all the time.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yep. And there are companies like Vacasa who are just trying to generate, hey, that seems like I'm a homeowner. That seems like a really interesting idea. I'm going to call Vacasa and sign up with them to list my house, as a vacation rental.
Gotcha.
Yep. But, we just heard today from somebody down in Augusta, that they had a call from a national company that was looking to buy, 8 or 11 houses on a lake down in Augusta.
Wow.
So I think it was 8 or 11. Suzanne, was it 8 or 11, Suzanne, or was it more or less? I don't know. I don't remember. It was a big amount.
Yeah, I'm looking it up right now. Hold on.
So the point being, that's great, perhaps, but also maybe not so great. So what do you want to, how do we want to think about that? I think the goal, as Martha was saying, would be to we just need to think about the issue and then position the town so that you can respond if and when it becomes a major issue.
It says it was 7 or 8 homes. on lakes. They were interested in adding ADUs to increase the value of the investments. I think it had to do with the state legislation.
Yep.
They're trying to capitalize on it.
So let's buy some homes on Long Pond and then add the accessory dwelling unit, although you really can't do that here.
Right.
No, but that's what they're trying to do in this legislation.
Right. It does I haven't read the legislation enough to think about it through the shoreline zoning lens, Kim, but does that, there's an inherent conflict there, just like we have in Mount
Yeah, for
Desert.
sure. Yep,
Say your
Yeah.
growth area encompasses a shoreland zone, you can't allow increased density in a shoreland zone in that way.
yeah. It says, where multifamily dwellings are allowed to have a dwelling unit density of at least 2.5 times the base density that is otherwise allowed in that location.
Yeah. 2.5 times.
Yep, 2.5 times the base density that is otherwise allowed in that location. And then it says, may not require more than 2 off-street parking spaces for every 3 units.
Yeah, so that would be like,
That'd be a
in your
multi-family.
VR1.
Yeah, multifamily is what they're saying.
So that's like, yeah, you're adding
More than 3.
2.5, yeah,
3 or 4.
basically 2.5 or whatever. Yep.
Shoreline zoning, affordable houses must comply with shoreline zoning requirements.
So that doesn't apply in shoreland zone.
No, I think they're still, trying to,
Trying to keep the people out of the shoreline is what they're
trying to
trying to do.
maintain the density along the shorefront still.
Yep. Okay. So sound like we're heading in the right direction?
I think it's a good start, Noel. I really do.
Great. All right. Next on the list is update on village planning. We're shooting for hopefully September for meetings. So we're going to do Otter Creek, Soamesville, and maybe
Steel Harbor.
Steel Harbor. Yep. That way,
What-
yeah, there's a few people in Steel Harbor who are kind of fired up about this thing too. So we'll use that. And then I think the village of Northeast Harbor is kind of its own discussion.
So are you meeting, have you already made arrangements for September to meet whoops, with the Otter Creek
We're going to
residents?
set the dates probably by next week.
So how are they gonna get notified?
We'll have to, I don't know, I haven't gotten that far yet, Kim. We're going to probably reach out to, how did we notify them last time? Did we do mailings or did we?
We put it in the paper and then on the website, and then I think we posted it in all the post offices. I can't remember if we sent each person a letter or if there was one person we contacted and then they
Yep.
informed.
Let's start with the first bunch and then when we talk to, people locally, maybe they can help spread the word. And then if you could just double check to see logistically how much of a frig it is to get like a mailing list. We could, if we had to do that, we could do that. I think that's a last resort.
Yeah, a mailing list would be everybody in Otter Creek.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if we need to go there quite yet. Okay. Anything else? Guess we're good.
What'd you say about the comp plan? Are you, you said that's where we're kind of due because 2009 was the last time it was updated.
100% due for a comp plan. we're ready to start doing a bunch of stuff on the comp plan, including starting the data stuff. I think I mentioned this to you guys before. What would be really good is to go start pulling data together for those data sections so that when we get to discussions about, housing and economic development, we have the data already updated. Everybody starts from a common perspective. I think that there's a lot of things that are happening in town that are very much comp plan driven conversations. So, we're going to be in a situation where it will be good to start the data and do a village planning process, like we're talking about at the same time. Normally you'd want to go, here's the data, here's the goals and strategies type process, but we're going to be kind of doing both at the same time.
You're getting your data from the US Census Bureau.
We will get data from the US Census. Yep.
I know there's a form I have to fill out every month for permits.
Cool.
Yeah, it's great.
Do you, by any chance, this is one thing we struggle with, is finding data on like seasonal structures versus year round. So when you do your permits, is there any way to track, okay, we should have a meeting some point, Kim, maybe just to go over what it is that you track, and then we can start to use that. It would be kind of interesting.
I think that's a great idea. And definitely what the survey, we hope to get out of the survey too.
Yeah, we could actually use the survey as another way. We could add some questions to the survey that would be helpful for the comp plan more broadly than just seasonal rentals. That might be a good thing to talk about, Suzanne, tomorrow. So if you guys are, you should do your comp plan now. You should start. And I think that there's a bunch of things happening in town in general that are really comprehensive plan questions. And you've got a pretty decent plan. So not all of it has to be a full on, rewrite. It's just, we got to look at it and then maybe try to simplify and prioritize in a little bit better way so that it doesn't become overwhelming. Because that to me is one of the downsides of the existing plan, is that there's just too much.
Well, I think the reason why there's so much in there is because the last comp plan, I think, was only 2 pages.
Yeah. I think
Seriously.
yeah.
Wow.
Well, I think it could be organized in a way that makes it less overwhelming.
Yeah, I've seen like objectives and stuff for each committee that had to complete, and planning board gave quite a few of their goals and objectives.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, and I think some things have changed since the last plan and some things are pretty much the same and maybe getting worse. So,
Yeah.
interesting. We're starting to dig in.
Do you think we're still kind of a quaint, unique town, or are we becoming more of a kind of following footsteps in Bar Harbor? More,
I don't-
like, are
Yeah.
we getting away from what we're known as far as being a unique town with what's going on with construction and permits and what you see?
Well, I don't think that you're getting closer to being another Bar Harbor. But I do think the challenge is going to be, and this is I think a really interesting question, like if a really interesting kind of comp plan question that I would love to pose for like the town of the village of Northeast Harbor. Like, what do you want to be? How do you want to be what do you want to be now that you're, grown up, or when you grow up, and what is Northeast Harbor in 2040?
Right.
And I think in my observation and kind of experience sort of working in different levels of things in Northeast Harbor is that there's a real big question on, I wouldn't be able to put money down on which side I would come on this question, but are you just happy being kind of a quaint little seasonal community, or do you really want to be more year round like it was, back when I was a kid? Or even before that, and I mean, those are really fundamental decisions.
Right.
And how you interpret things and what things you allow from a code and a land use perspective, which is all tied to the comprehensive plan, what kind of investments that you make, that's fundamental. And I don't know, Chuck, you may have an observation on it, or Kim or Derlin, but it's really, I couldn't tell you how people would come down. Like if you really asked the question that way.
I mean, it's hard to bring it back to what it was, of course, you know. but,
Never going to be the same. That's right.
No, because things have changed, times have changed. I mean, soon, 2040, I'm sure I'll be gone, but, you know, by then, you know, cars will be flying, you know, you won't be driving on roads.
Yep, we'll just go right from the water to downtown, and we'll fight about all the extra parking spaces, you know, behind.
That's
the
right.
villa.
I don't know, I think parking is gonna be a concern.
I'm sure it'll be a concern, but again, this is a whole nother topic. Like parking is, a lot of parking is perception versus demand. And, you know, it's really interesting. It's all, I mean, you're going through some stuff that it's a really good time to have those conversations with the comp plan. So, you know, do you really need to, there's elements of each part of a comp plan that we really need to focus on. And then there are some things that we can kind of just be like, yep, we're good here. It's kind of the same as it was before. You know, I don't always pick on natural resources, but that's one that, you know, we know that there's a lot of good natural resources and where they are and certain things that we need to protect. So maybe we don't spend a bunch of time there, but, you know, just because you are adjacent to Acadia National Park doesn't mean you're fully, you know, doing as good of a job as you could on recreational opportunities, for example, you know, things like that we could have conversations about. Or, you know, the housing in the downtown, the village planning, you know, how do we think about villages and keep the whole goal of keeping the ordinance, you know, as simple as possible. You know, those two things don't necessarily work together, as you know, Kim. And,
Oh, I know. You know, people don't want to see it get big either, you know, they don't want rules brought down either, so it's.
Yeah, so I mean, there's things that we are struggling with right now, just trying to keep that objective and also give people what they want in terms of flexibility for doing development. So it's,
True.
but I don't know. I think there's definitely Mount Desert is still very unique in so many ways, but I don't know. I think you're going through some fun-ish planning stuff if you're a dork like I am. Really good questions. You know, process and community conversations are going to be important.
Yeah, it is, because those are the people that live there and you want their input, you know.
Yep. So, yeah, how do you want to drive your investments?
That's right.
Fundamentally, what land use, what the comp plan is all about.
True.
Yep.
That's what our ordinances are based on, is that comp plan, so.
Yeah, well, that's key, you know, future land use, and how do we do it in a way that's simple enough to give you some flexibility, but directive enough to help you support your ordinances.
Right.
You know, I think your existing plan is a good starting point. You know, do we really, you know, some of the future land use stuff isn't going to change. It's really going to be like how we, you know, think about certain areas. Like we're not going to really change the, you know, the future land use goals of Beach Hill Road, right? You know, that's key watershed to 2 different lakes, and you know, it is what it is.
That's right, yeah.
But where are you going to put more? Where do you put more houses? You know,
Right.
those are kind of interesting.
Down in your downtown, you're close to downtown neighborhoods, you know, there.
Sure. Well, you already have like a good, you know, I think, you know, your village residential districts are like the next layer out from the downtown, and you know, those are where the houses, you know, from an infrastructure perspective really should go.
Right. Zoning is called rural for a reason, rural.
Yeah.
Not as much development.
Theoretically.
Yep.
Yep. But it's really, I mean, it's not my town. I like to ask the questions and help you find solutions. But I do also happen to have grown up here and I just kind of feel I love Mount Desert. So
Southwest Harbor going through the same thing, the whole.
I think Southwest Harbor is going through the same thing, Chuck. And I think that just again, this is all just my observation. I feel that Mount Desert in particular does a really good job of thinking about it, whereas Southwest Harbor basically is just putting their head in the sand and pretending that we're all a bunch of local people and, you know, nothing's changing. But my observation, and maybe other people have different perspectives on it, is that if you think about what's happened in Northeast Harbor, and even like, so you take Seal Harbor and the value of what's happening over there, and there are certain income levels that are now looking at and have been looking at properties in Northeast Harbor. And that is increasing the value of properties in Northeast Harbor. And then those people who were once in Northeast Harbor in a higher income bracket are now looking at places in Southwest Harbor because it's a similar kind of small town vibe, but more affordable. And that's what's happening on like Clark Point Road and Herrick Road, up on the high road, you know, places like that in Southwest Harbor that have, you know, my litmus test is always Halloween, or it was until my kids stopped going trick or treating, but you can just walk around the village and see the difference in lights that are on or not on over the past 18 years, you know.
How many kids come to your house to get candy, you know?
None come to my house. I think but you know, it's like, you know, it used to be when my kids were younger, you know, we could walk downtown and through Clark Point Road and all the way down around Herrick Road and hit, you know, almost the house all the time. And then just the past several years, it's been, you know, I had a friend of ours, they have a house on the Clark Point Road, and they actually posted people at houses that used to be year round that were around them to just give out candy because it was, you know, we wanted to keep that going. But it's the same. I mean, you know, you've probably observed it a lot more, obviously, Chuck, than I have. But you know, isn't that the same thing that happened in Northeast Harbor?
Yeah. Yeah. The only good street to go trick or treating is Summit Road, is where most of the people live.
Yeah. So, you know, but who's buying up property on Summit Road?
It's starting to happen, isn't it?
Right. So it's, you know, I don't know. I find it really interesting. But we'll get there. That's it.
It was good work. We'll appreciate it.
Thanks. Well, maybe in August, we'll get a few more committee members to show up.
Yes, hope so.
I'll write up some ordinances and get people fired up.
Yeah, that would do it.
Yeah, people show up for that. Okay,
Okay, thanks.
thanks.
Thanks, Noel.
Thank you.
Yeah.
See ya.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.